she's going to tell you all about her ordeal, and she's really got a story for you. And if you have any questions about, what her diagnosis, over here by the evaluations, I do have some handouts on the broken heart syndrome, and that's what Regina was diagnosed with. It's kind of rare, so there is education over there if you want to get a handout. Okay? And Regina's now in cardiac rehab. He just said that a man didn't leave you, did you, for a broken heart?
Some way.
But Regina's in cardiac rehab now, so this is Regina.
Hi, everybody. It's good to get to see other people with ICDs because I don't. Most everybody else has coronary artery disease, or they've had stents put in or other things. And it's good to see that other people, especially outside of my group, that we go through a cardiac rehab, because I'm about 20 years younger than the youngest person in that group. So it's good to see people, some peers, a mixed group. If you would have asked me at the beginning of the year what an ICD was and whether it happened, I wouldn't have known what you were talking about. I had no idea. I started New Year just like everybody else with New Year's resolutions. Get rid of your stress, eat better, relax, exercise, and just never had any idea. I turned 54 on the 29th of March, and I am married. I have 2 children, and I have one son surviving who was 23. And he was a college graduate as of March 19th. I lost my oldest son March 25th, 2001, 10 years and 11 days after April 5th, which is when I had my event. My son was killed in an auto accident in 2001 after surviving childhood leukemia. April 5th of this year was a Tuesday. I had a couple of appointments that day on my schedule. I work at Fifth Third Bank in the retail mortgage department as a mortgage loan originator. My job is pretty crazy. As most of you know, the economy's bad, the mortgage real estate industry is tough, and it's become increasingly different. My job is 100% commission incentive based, so it's a lot of pressure. And I did have a decent pipeline of loans, but I was under pressure to increase my production, and our commissions were reduced because of the federal laws that went into effect in the Dodd-Frank bill at the beginning of this year. So, that was very stressful, and I'm like, well, is it me, or is it the economy, or is it because of all these new guidelines, or, that's a big stress when all of a sudden you have to increase production. And, I have a job where I wear a suit, I meet in public, and, I'm accountable for that. So, on top of that, it was a 10-year anniversary of my son's death. And I had already decided, it was time to compartmentalize that. The 10-year anniversary was a good time to move forward and become, put that as a hallmark for that day. So I got up, went to work on the 5th of April, got dressed, walked the dog. I had watched the NCAA tournament the night before, and I had a noon appointment, and I had a 2:15 appointment. The 2:15 appointment was a young Fifth Third employee and his friend were going to rehab a 4-unit building in Coreyville. And I was like, I really don't want to do this. It's not a lot of money, it's a lot of work, but it's an employee, so I have to do it. So, it was one of those things, all this stuff going on. I really don't want to do this, but I have to. So we sat down to have a meeting. Guy and his buddy come in and sit at my desk, and I'm talking to them. And at some point in that 15 minutes after I got there, I became unresponsive and started to not be able to talk back to them. So they went out and got a teller out of the teller line and said, something's going on back here. So one of my coworkers came back, and I was starting to slump over, And he asked me if I was okay, and from what I understand, the last thing I said was, I feel strange. And he tried to prop me up, tried to feel for a pulse in my neck and in my wrist, and I had no pulse.
Oh, my goodness.
So they called the EMTs right away, because any big company has protocol for those kinds of things, so they were right on the ball with that. But no one in the office knew CPR. So I have some pretty strong thoughts about CPR. I know CPR. Everybody in my house knows CPR. I train lifeguards. My son was a lifeguard. My husband learned it because we said, you got to know what to do. And he worked in a factory in gas for years and was one of the trained people there that if somebody fell down, this is what you do. So the EMTs, Cincinnati Fire Department guys arrived. They shocked me right away with the defibrillator, and I didn't respond. So they started manual CPR, and they broke a bunch of ribs because they did CPR the whole way to the hospital. Shocked me 2 more times, still nothing. I don't remember any of this. I don't remember the day before. Everything I tell you is from doctors, friends, family, and the EMT. Actually, one of the main EMT is one of my neighbors. And he walked in the office and said, oh my God, this is my neighbor. And of course, that's a pretty scary thing. But another weird thing is that the other guy on the squad, there were 3 or 4 of them, I don't remember, I don't know anything about that. But the one guy I did a loan for, so he looked at me and said, you know,
Oh, geez.
So, did he shock you again? I got shocked twice more on the way to the hospital. And then when I got to the hospital, they brought me in, and the shocks had made my heart start to quiver. They call it quivers. And I don't know what that means, because I'm just a person who knows nothing about heart disease. I mean, that was a least scenario. I could imagine myself having cancer, having dementia, having every other thing, but never would I've always been careful about my diet, I've always been active, always done stuff like that. It was just bizarre. So, anyhow, wait a minute here. When I was taken into the hospital, since they couldn't get my heart to beat, they implanted, they took me in and put in 2 cardiac catheters and ran teeny tiny pumps into my heart. And kept my heart beating for 2 to 3 days. And after the 2nd day, which was a Thursday, the pumps were having trouble working. So we discussed, apparently I was there but didn't have anything to say about it because I was intubated and they used a hypothermic treatment on me and dropped my temperature down and put me in an induced coma. They talked to my son and my husband about a heart transplant or an external heart pump. And my son said, my mom will not have an external heart pump. I know her well enough, she could not handle that. So the question became, what do we do? So the pumps were working and they had to pull them out. When they pulled them out, my heart started beating again.